Australia has more than 27 million people, but nearly two-thirds of them live in just 5 cities, places like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. That means 95% of the country's land is almost empty. 89% of the population lives in cities, most of them along the coast. The middle of the country, known as the outback, is dry, remote, and difficult to reach. In fact, only 1.9% of Australians live in remote or very remote areas. That's less than 2 out of every 100 people. Why? To find out, we need to look beyond the maps, into the land, the history, the people, and the stories they carry. The dominance of arid and semi-arid zones, Australia is the driest inhabited continent on Earth, and that fact alone explains a lot about its population. About 70% of the country is covered in arid or semi-arid land, where rain is scarce and unpredictable. This dry interior, known as the outback, begins just past the Great Dividing Range and stretches across most of the continent. These regions often get less than 500 millimeters of rainfall per year, which is far too little to support regular farming or large towns without outside water sources. Even the plants and animals here have adapted to long dry periods, followed by short bursts of heavy rain, a pattern that makes life unstable for people. In total, 81% of Australia is made up of rangelands, where the climate is too extreme for most types of agriculture or dense human settlement. People need steady access to fresh water, food, and infrastructure, and these things are nearly impossible to maintain across such dry, remote landscapes. Building cities in these areas would require massive investment in water systems, transport, and energy, which is rarely seen as worth the cost. Landforms and terrain. Australia is the flattest continent on Earth, but that doesn't make it easy to live on. In fact, that flatness is one reason the land is so dry. Without tall mountains, there's less rain and more evaporation. Most of the land sits low and wide, especially in the interior lowlands and the Western Plateau, which are filled with deserts, dry plains, and endless sand dunes. Only about 6% of the continent rises above 600 meters, and without elevation, rivers often dry up before reaching the sea. The Great Dividing Range on the east coast is one of the few mountain chains, and it plays a key role, catching rain on one side and leaving the other side dry. To the west of this range, the land becomes much harsher, with little vegetation and almost no surface water. In contrast, the coastal rim, especially in the east, is more fertile, wetter, and varied in terrain, making it far more suitable for farming in cities. That's why almost all major Australian cities are built near the ocean, where the landscape supports fresh water, food, and transport. Rainfall variability. Australia is officially the driest inhabited continent on Earth, with an average rainfall of just 457 millimeters a year, based on data from 1900 to 2020. Some parts of the country go months without any rain and then get sudden downpours that cause floods instead of helping the land absorb water. Across the entire continent, Australia's streamflow, the flow of water in rivers, is the third most variable in the world, meaning it changes from year to year more than almost anywhere else on Earth. This extreme climate variability means the country swings between long droughts and short, intense floods, which makes long-term water planning very difficult. For example, between 2018 and 2020, Australia experienced its driest 2-year period on record, putting huge pressure on water storage systems. Since 2016, rainfall and streamflow levels have dropped so much that many people with water licenses in rural areas couldn't access the water they were legally allowed to use. To manage water in such a harsh and unpredictable climate, you need expensive infrastructure, like large dams and complex distribution networks, and it's simply not realistic to build and maintain that across the vast interior. Water scarcity. To deal with its dry and unpredictable climate, Australia has built over 500 major surface water storages, but most of the suitable rivers have already been dammed. Even with all that effort, by early 2020, storage levels dropped to just 45%, and some areas barely recovered to half full by the end of the year. The Murray-Darling Basin, a key source of water for inland farms and towns, saw its northern storages remain below 50% full for nearly 3 years. Because surface water isn't enough, people have turned to groundwater, especially from the Great Artesian Basin, one of the world's largest underground water systems. But that water is under pressure too, with overuse, pollution, and climate change, preventing it from fully recharging, even decades after drought. Today, more than 400 regional and remote communities in Australia still don't have safe or reliable drinking water. They face serious problems: water shortages, poor quality, expensive treatment, and broken systems they can't afford to fix. Big cities can afford desalination plants and major pipelines, but those kinds of projects are rarely built in the remote interior. Simply put, it costs too much to bring good water to places where few people live, and that's one of the main reasons they stay empty. Historical settlement and economic development. When Europeans first arrived in Australia, they settled along the east coast, where the land was fertile, the rainfall was steady, and the sea offered access to trade. These coastal areas made farming, transportation, and survival much easier than the dry, harsh interior. As towns grew, they became centers of power and commerce, with roads, ports, schools, and government all built around them. This early concentration of people and investment created a strong pattern that continued over time, what experts call a path dependency. It meant that future growth naturally followed the coast, because the coast already had everything people needed to live and work. Meanwhile, inland towns struggled to keep up. By the late 20th century, many small rural towns were shrinking or disappearing, as modern farming needed fewer workers and cities offered more jobs. Even though mining and grazing still exist inland, these industries usually require small, specialized, or short-term workforces, not enough to build lasting communities. Digital divide. In today's world, internet access isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline, especially in remote and rural communities. But in Australia, the digital divide between cities and remote areas is massive. In some remote First Nations communities, less than 1 in 3 have access to high-quality fiber connections, relying instead on weak satellite or microwave links. This poor connectivity means basic things like online shopping, telehealth, or even checking the weather can become nearly impossible. Many government services, including emergency support, are now only available online. But some remote towns can go days without any reliable signal. When storms hit or power lines go down, these areas are often cut off entirely, leaving residents without access to critical updates or help. Transport and service accessibility. One of the biggest challenges in remote Australia is just getting from place to place. The distances are extreme, the roads are few, and many communities are completely disconnected from national transport routes. That means things most people take for granted, like healthcare, schools, and even food deliveries, are harder to reach and much more expensive. Without good roads or regular services, it's difficult for people to live, work, or raise families in these areas. And when fewer people live there, governments and companies are less likely to invest in the infrastructure they need. This creates a vicious cycle. No services means no people, and no people means no services. As a result, towns shrink or disappear altogether, and new ones rarely get started. Climate change. Australia is already feeling the heat, literally. Since 1910, the country has warmed by over 1.5 degrees Celsius, and heat waves are now longer, stronger, and more frequent, especially in cities like Perth. At the same time, rainfall during cooler months is decreasing, which means longer, harsher droughts, especially in the south and east. These areas are where most Australians live today, so climate change isn't just a problem for the future, it's already making everyday life harder. Add to that bushfires, which are now more intense and more common, fueled by the same rising heat and dry conditions. These fires not only destroy homes and forests, they also pollute water supplies and damage the land itself, making it harder to recover or rebuild. And while the coast may seem like a safe haven, rising sea levels and more severe storms are starting to threaten those areas too. This creates a dangerous reality. The interior is too dry to live in, but now, parts of the coast may become too risky as well. That means Australia's small zones of livable land may shrink even more. So, why is 95% of Australia still empty? Well, it's not just the heat, or the distance, or the lack of water. It's all of it, working together, like a chain. Without big changes in how we plan, build, and adapt, the wide open heart of Australia may stay just as empty tomorrow as it is today. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us on this journey across one of the world's most unique landscapes. Take care, and we'll see you next time.